back to Neutrality Studies. This is Pascal Lotta coming to you from Japan, and I'm joined today by Arthur Kachikian. He's a doctor of political science and a good colleague who's been on the show before. Arthur, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for coming. And maybe let's start with your home region, Armenia, the South Caucasus.
Today there's a report that the first nuclear facility was hit, and so far there's no radiation leak, but that's also something to consider. I mean, where should I start? This is a catastrophe at a regional level. This is a catastrophe at the global level. With your permission, we can start with the region, and then if you want, I'll just share some broader thoughts with you. Yes. But you just prompt me. So first, there were some scenarios, right? Number one is that the U.S. is just trying to intimidate Iran to give in to its claims. That didn't happen. The second scenario was the Belgrade, Yugoslavia scenario, that they would bomb Iran until Iran gives in. That didn't happen either. Then they tried the Syrian scenario, or you could also say Libyan in a different sense, but probably Syrian, where after the bombardment, the original bombardment, they tried to use ethnic minorities to provoke an ethnic war in Iran. They tried to provoke a civil war. That didn't work. The hope was probably that after this initial bombing, the opposition would take to the streets. That didn't happen. Then reportedly, according to some reports, some American media outlets were reporting that they tried to use the Kurds, and the Kurds refused. Wisely, because they were used already twice in Syria, and twice they were abandoned, so they learned their lesson. And then there was an attempt to drag.
Can I just ask? Are you pretty sure, or is the U.S. still working on the Kurds in order to get them in? Is the latest news that you have is that the Kurds are actually not hot on doing this?
I can only rely on open sources, what I see in Telegram channels, and the best I can do is just compare what different people are saying. I know that very authoritative outlets in the U.S., like CNN, I think, and some major outlets were saying that the U.S. is working with the Kurds. So that part, we can probably say is probably true. There were some reports that Kurds already crossed the border. Then they were denied by the Kurds. Then there were some reports that they tried, but then they were shot at and rebuffed in Iran. So it's hard to say exactly what is happening, but it's very plausible that an attempt was made to use the Kurds. And it wouldn't be the first time. And it makes sense that you would try to use an ethnic minority in Iran. Of course, there are other minorities. There's a 15 million strong Azeri minority in the northern regions of Iran. There's the Baluch minority, the Arab minority. So if the goal is the dismemberment of Iran, of course, the opportunities are there. And it would make sense because apparently the air campaign, although it was successful, even though Iran managed to respond, it's probably not going to succeed in changing the regime in Iran. Yes, you can bomb Tehran, you can turn it into another Gaza, but it's probably not going to change the regime. So then at some point, both sides will find themselves in an impasse. What do? Let's say you destroyed all of the ballistic missiles in Iran, destroyed all the drones, you bombed these people into oblivion, you killed another 165 10-year-old girls, just appalling. What do you do then? How do you change the regime? Well, you got to put boots on the ground, as they say. Well, hopefully it's not going to come to that because that's going to be suicidal. But there are some reports. Actually, there were some statements that the U.S. does not rule it out. But they tried to use other people first, the Kurds, probably the Azeris. Now that that hasn't succeeded, they will probably consider this step, which would be a total catastrophe. I was just reading and watching some documentaries and reading, just refresh my memory on the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. And this is what amazes me, is that we refuse to learn. We refuse to learn. When you invade a country, you may be successful in removing its government, changing the power structure of that country. But then you have to understand that the only reason why whatever regime you created, the only reason it exists is because you are there. So then do you stay in there indefinitely and support this new political architecture and then suffer 4,000 casualties in Iraq and 2,500 casualties in Afghanistan, and then you withdraw because you realize that you can't stay there forever? There's an asymmetry of interest, asymmetry of resources, and asymmetry of legitimacy. So eventually you're going to have to withdraw. and whatever you created is going to fall apart spectacularly, like it did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Are you about to repeat the same mistake in Iran? It's a lot bigger, from what I understand, and the population is huge. How are you going to control this country? Are you going to do the same thing now? So Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan were not tragic enough. Now you want another one, another tragedy. It's very hard for me to understand.
I don't know. Like I know people say like these were moments when the United States lost the war, but I keep saying like no, they didn't. South Vietnam lost the Vietnam War. The Afghan Republic or whatever it was called lost the Afghan War. And Iraq too lost the Iraq war, and until today, you know, their oil proceeds are managed in New York, and the government. I mean, the parliament has already asked the United States to leave several times, and the US just simply says no. They still control Iraq. They have like logistical control and air control over Iraq. I mean, and by extension, Israel. So, I mean, also Libya. People keep saying like, oh, it's a complete disaster. Yes, for the Libyans. But not for the Israelis, not for the Americans. For them, it is, you know, if chaos is what you want, then it's actually quite a success. And in my view, you know, the strategy, especially the Israeli strategy in its immediate neighborhood, has been massive amounts of chaos, because it helps you to control the region. So if absolute chaos is what the US and Israel want for Iran, then, you know, like carpet bombing and so on, and destroying all semblance of all possibility for normal civilian life, well, that's exactly what you would do. Of course, it presupposes an extremely vicious goal, but I have no indication at the moment to rule that goal out.
Yes, but eventually you would bear the political and moral, if there is such a thing, responsibility for what you did. Because you invaded this country, you disturbed, you changed the political balance within that country, and now if you withdraw, then you're responsible for the consequences. The Taliban prevailed.
No, that's the point. You're not. How many Americans did hang from a tree for Afghanistan? How many hang for Iraq? How many hang for Vietnam? How many presidents were put into prison in The Hague for any of those?
Yes,
no,
but
these people have no responsibilities. They will never bear responsibilities.
Yes, I will speak to that and then share an observation with you.
Let's go.
59,000 young Americans died in Vietnam. And then later on, President Carter said that the domino theory was a stretch. That is a crime. Over 1 million Vietnamese.
59,000 young Americans who are not on the street protesting the government back in Washington. I mean, it's really diabolical, but I do think these people think in those terms. But Arthur, let's continue with your analysis, because I think overall the point that this is not a war that can be won is absolutely correct. But where does that leave us?
Yes, but just to finish off, 2,500 Americans died in Afghanistan and 4,500 Americans died in Iraq, not to mention hundreds of thousands of people who were killed in both countries, and 1.5 million Vietnamese at a minimum killed in Vietnam, and no one was responsible for this. I agree with you. It's a crime. There is a French saying, you know, if you kill one person, you go to jail. If you kill 50 people, you go to a psychiatrist. And if you kill 1 million people, you become a hero and you get a sculpture erected in your honor. So, why would the U.S. walk into the same trap? Why would they do the same thing? Apparently, number one, some very dangerous religious overtones coming from Washington. People speaking in terms of the Bible and Armageddon and the return of Jesus Christ. I mean, this is very dangerous. We have a leader, a group that leads the most powerful country in the world, a nuclear power, a superpower, and they're talking in terms of a religious war, like a Christian jihad or a crusade. So what is going to happen next? Now we're going to have the next Raymond of Toulouse or Guillaume of Bouillon or Richard Lionheart. I mean, Pete Hegseth. I mean, he speaks like a boy. I mean, he's a great guy with a very respectable career, but I mean, he sounds like a teenager who is enjoying the fight. I mean, this is pretty dangerous to frame this in terms of a religious war. What I want to say, Pascal, is that what we're witnessing is an earthquake. This is an international earthquake of global proportions. This is the end of international law, international legitimacy, international public opinion. international organizations, the UN system, the post-1945 world order. In fact, it's the end of any world order. It's the end of the entire idea of equilibrium, common European security, the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe. It's the end of the entire arms control architecture. We pretty much, START was not renewed. We pretty much now only have the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty that's more or less being respected. The non-proliferation regime is on its way out. The INF Treaty, gone. The Anti-Ballistic Missile Defense, ABM Treaty, gone. Conventional forces in Europe, gone. Open skies, gone. Am I forgetting anything? There must have been something else. All these treaties just gone out the window. The entire arms control system has fallen apart. The entire philosophy of sustaining peace by mutual understanding, compromise, and equilibrium, out the door. We have seen the end of liberal dream. This is the end of liberalism. For the last 400 years, English, French, Dutch, American, and other authors told us that the ideal condition for the human society is liberal democracy, that democracies live in peace with each other. They don't attack each other. And it's the ideal form for both internal and external politics, starting with Thomas Hobbes to John Locke, to John Stuart Mill, to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, to Montesquieu, to Adam Smith, to Voltaire. All these people now have become irrelevant. We went back 400 years of liberal thought. You have a democracy, a leading democracy, behaving this way for the last 25 years. People will tell me, Arthur, you're exaggerating. It's just one person. It's not one person. England and France are joining. We have the General Secretary of NATO saying we're an alliance of democracies. We're going to join this war. We have
the German Chancellor. Who literally, like in the Oval Office, pats the back of the President of the United States, saying, "No, we are with you in this one."
Yes, so Mr. Fukuyama can go back to the 90s and write his book again. This is the end, but not the end of history. This is the end of liberal democracy. This is the end of Western liberal democracy, because everything we knew about Western liberal democracy is out the window. The free press, finished. The force of, the power of public opinion, gone. Liberal values, talk about liberal values, killing 165 children and not even talking about it, gone. Economic interdependence, institutional constraints, all of these elements of liberal theory just fell apart. And we're now walking on a cemetery of world orders and ideals of how to prevent war. This is what humanity was thinking since times immemorial. If we went back, 13th century BC, the first treaty between Ramses II and the Hittites, I always forget the name. Anyway, it was 13th century BC. If we took the time machine like Austin Powers and went back to the 13th century BC, and they asked us, people of the future, we want to know, how do we avoid war? Tell us. We would say, we have learned absolutely nothing. In thousands of years of human history, we have absolutely nothing. We are now walking at a cemetery of world orders. We just have a fresh tomb, which is MAGA, Make America Great Again. That turned out to be a hoax. Right next to it, we have George Bush Sr. with the New World Order. A few steps away, we have Mikhail Gorbachev with his New Thinking. A couple of steps away, we have another tomb for Woodrow Wilson with his League of Nations. Then next to it, we have a Concert of Europe of the 19th century that fell apart. Then we have the tomb of Immanuel Kant with his Perpetual Peace. Then we have dozens and dozens of other tombs. We've talked about this before. All the liberal thinkers, Jeremy Bentham, the Assembly of Europe. We have the Saint-Simon, Abbé de Saint-Pierre. We have the Duke of Sully, European Federation, European Council, the League of European Nations. All of it is a cemetery of these ideas. Humanity trying to control itself, trying to prevent war. All of it has fallen apart. This is a huge cemetery now.
But the thing to understand is it was taken apart by the liberals themselves. It was taken apart by the apostles of this kind of system. I mean, just your own country of Armenia, just look at how the EU just treated you. It is the very people who profess that they want to defend democracy who go out and support the most kind of blatant authoritarian political movements, as long as they're working in their general geopolitical kind of frameworks.
Well, yes, of course. We have our new dictator. We have our new Saddam Hussein, who is arresting the members of our church, the clergy, the opposition, the journalists, and he's supported by Europe. Would France or England or Germany tolerate a lawyer thrown to the ground in front of the courthouse because he wrote something on Facebook? Would they tolerate the Archbishop of Canterbury being pursued, criminal charges being initiated against him, or any archbishop in France or Germany being arrested simply because it disagrees with this government? The hypocrisy of it is really hard to bear. It's these double standards. I'm a big liberal. You know this. I believe in this. I told you when I was a teenager in the USSR, I used my grandma's old shortwave radio at night and to wake up at 2 a.m. to listen to, the Radio Free Europe or Radio Liberty or BBC. I was very pro-Western, pro-liberal. And for me to realize that everything I believed in turned out to be a hoax is pretty painful. Because democracy now basically turned into the art of manipulating the public opinion using the social media. And in a democracy, you see that the government, instead of being accountable to its voters, it's accountable to lobbyists and private group interests and donors.
Yeah,
it's a complete corruption of democracy.
I must say it is parliamentary democracy that we are talking about. It's kind of easy to capture elite version of project of actually empowering the masses. And I must say, if you go to Switzerland and you look at how the political process works there, we still do have more of this liberal dream that's alive. Although I must say it's packaged very, very differently. But it's parliamentary democracy, which just ends up captured by the interests of certain groups that then all answer to certain capitalist frameworks.
Yes, it's the English model, going back to the model parliament of the 13th century. Sadly, it seems to have been corrupted. And you're, of course, from the country of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who believed in direct referendum and volonté générale. Of course, it's a different model. But we really have to rethink the way in which we manage ourselves, because democracy has gone out the window. Look what's happening with the leading democracy in the world. This is an enormous moral blow to all the ideals that we have been cherishing for the last 400 years.
True, although the thing is, these ideals, they were never universally rolled out, right? I mean, women were not really part of it from the get-go. And let's not forget that the leading democracy in the world, the United States, was then a leading democracy on the graveyard of an entire civilization in its on the North American continent, right? The genocide on the indigenous Americans was a prerequisite for the modern United States then to exist. So it was never a project for everybody. It was always a project for a group. And then the discussion always was, should it apply to this or that minority or not? And we're again at that point, right?
But then it became a project for everyone, because democracies decided that they have to spread democracy, because the democratic peace theory says democracies don't fight each other. Look at what's happening now. Therefore, if you want to live in a peaceful world, you have to start a war to prevent a war. You have to start fighting to impose your democratic system on other countries, and then you will live in peace. And it's also a big tragedy for American foreign policy, because the U.S., this Virgin Republic that was established 300 years ago, believed that it has its own path. The founders of the United States believed, as you know, that the U.S. should not get involved in the wicked old ways of Europe, the old wars of Europe. We should stay clear of that. No entangling alliances. We have our new mission. Our mission is democracy and, pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And now the U.S. is behaving like every other empire before it. It's really very frustrating to have the leader of the United States. I mean, it's a country that had John Kennedy, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I mean, dare I say Ronald Reagan. Your audience is going to attack me, of course. But the country that gave us these leaders and others, now we have a person who behaves like he is the Roman emperor. He is punishing countries for disagreeing with him. The prime minister of Spain, kudos to him. He had the cojones to say, we're not going to participate in this, and we don't approve of this. We learned our lesson. And then the emperor of the world tells him that he's going to be punished for it. When did this happen? I mean, imagine if Russia behaved this way or China behaved this way. Christian Amanpour and Anderson Cooper and Piers Morgan from BBC, they would be foaming at their mouth. They would talk about it so much that foam would come out of their mouth, like a dishwasher if you used a regular detergent. I did it once. Don't do it because the foam comes all out. They would be foaming at their mouth if any other country spoke like this. Now we have the leader of the United States speak like he's the Holy Roman Emperor, speaking on behalf of the world and invoking the Bible, invoking Armageddon. Do you understand where we have arrived?
Did he already invoke it himself as well?
Well, his group has. I'm not sure that he has, but the people who surround him certainly have.
I know his group has, and I made a show about that just last week, and actually the last talk with Stas Kripivnik also about that. I mean, it is scary by how many evangelicals are like in leadership positions right around him, and in the military, like through and through the ranks, they're still there. And these people look at this as a holy war. And that then would explain why this war looks utterly insane, because it is designed to be insane. But that kind of, it makes the whole thing only even more scary, because we couldn't even approach it with rationalist analysis about, Clausewitz's war is the continuation of politics by all the means.
Yeah. No, this is completely irrational, especially given the experience of Afghanistan and Iraq and even Vietnam. It's, thousands and thousands of American boys, young American men and women have to die because of this incredibly unclever decisions. As I was studying, the history of Iraq and Afghanistan, I was watching some documentaries. What amazes me is that people who make the decisions in their capitals, thousands of miles away, have no idea. They don't have the slightest idea as to what is actually happening on the ground. This detachment of the decision makers from the people who are actually in the situation, people of the situation, as they say in French, they know it, but they're unable to communicate the information to the decision-making center. And the decision-making center operates on the basis of false assumptions, personal biases, personal opinions. I mean, look at this whole idea of counterinsurgency, winning the hearts and minds in Afghanistan and Iraq. Total disaster. But the decision makers didn't know, or perhaps they knew, but they preferred not to believe it, or going into a certain country and destroying its entire political system. I mean, this is not difficult. If I walk into somebody's house, I destroy the walls, and I have to hold up the roof, otherwise it's going to come down. And then people are going to ask me, Arthur, how long are you planning to stay here? Are you going to hold it for an hour, for a day, for 20 years? I mean, are you sure you're going to stay here and sustain the system? Because when you withdraw, it's really very, very simple. The system that you create by a military intervention only exists because you are part of it. You became part of it. So the configuration of power has changed because of your intervention. Therefore, the moment you withdraw, it's going to fall apart because it only exists because of you. Then you're going to have the Afghan army fall apart because of corruption and all these ghost soldiers. And then you're going to have a civil war in Iraq between the Shia and the Sunni. Is it difficult? Is it complicated to imagine this? It's not complicated. I'm beginning to sound like Julia Roberts from Erin Brockovich. It's not complicated. You go in there and you destroy a society, and then you are not planning to stay there because there is a symmetry of interest, a symmetry of resources, and a symmetry of legitimacy. And Afghan and Iraqi people are not going to think of you the same way as they think of the Taliban and the Shia and the Sunni. You have to understand it. How difficult is it to understand it?
Of course. But I mean, honestly, I think they do understand it. The Lindsey Grahams and so on, they know that, but they don't care because it's fine. It's fine. Again, they make a lot of money. They are safe between two big fat oceans. They are as safe, as cozy, and as happy, and it works, and it makes money for them and everybody else. I mean, for them, life is getting better and better and better. Millions of people die, but they couldn't care less because they have a narrative which to explain it themselves, and they literally say that these people are better dead than alive because that's freedom. And so on. So it works, and it works because it works. It's like evolution doesn't work because it wants to get us somewhere, because it wants to create humans. Humans exist because there's just how stuff worked in the end, and it works for them. So the system of warfare that the United States built, and Europe is an essential part of it and integrated in it, it works. So the only question is it going to work us to the point of the Black Swan event where these nuclear missiles are going to fly and where it will stop working? But at that point, it will be too far.
to your last point, what we see is the end of the non-proliferation regime, because now many countries are going to scratch their heads and they're going to say, well, it looks like the only way to be safe. By the way, there were negotiations going on when the attack happened. So you can't even trust negotiations. Ali Khamenei was in his office with his grandchild, who I understand was like a year-old child, with his family, and they destroyed him while the negotiations were going on the second time. So how are you going to trust this? So now many countries are going to say, the only way to be safe is really to have nuclear weapons, to go North Korea, to follow the North Korean model.
North Korea has been vindicated on all accounts. I mean, it turns out, who would have thought that we would all draw our heads in front of the superior knowledge of the superior leader of North Korea? Because you were absolutely right. Obviously, the only thing that keeps the Americans from invading you, if you're not on one page with them, is nuclear weapons.
But that also has its downsides, drawbacks. It has its very serious drawbacks, because then the other countries will start acquiring nuclear weapons. If Iran goes nuclear, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt are probably going to follow suit. The nuclear weapons are going to start spreading in the region. You see Macron now is saying that he's going to increase his nuclear potential, not even say how many warheads he has. So now we have the NPT out the window. I just went through a whole list of treaties that went right out the window. This is another one. So then what is the danger with that? My wonderful professor, one of the best instructors I've had in the U.S. By the way, the U.S. has some of the best IR experts in the world. I admire them. But why is there such a mismatch? We talked about this the first time, between the expertise of the IR community in the U.S. and the foreign policy of its government. I would never understand this. Anyway, he counted more than 160 cases, I think. I may be wrong with numbers, but over 100 cases of an accidental nuclear war, where accidental nuclear war was possible during the Cold War. Computer mistakes, human error, a bear climbing a fence in Minnesota that sent nuclear bombers into the air because the wires were connected the wrong way, and the signal was sent that the U.S. is being attacked. A tape loaded into a computer with an imitation of a nuclear game that was taken for real. A Norwegian missile launched into the atmosphere, scientific missile that the Russian radar took as a nuclear launch. A flock of birds flying over a radar in Turkey that was taken for a Soviet nuclear attack. There are over 100 cases. Multiply this by the number of countries that are going to be involved. Consider the fact that they may not have the perfect or near perfect organizational safeguards that the USSR and the US had during the Cold War. Then consider the fact that their flying time now is going to be much shorter because the territories are closer. During the Cold War, it was, from what I understand, between 15 and 20, 25 minutes of flight time. Now you're lucky if you get 3 minutes, because these countries are going to be very close. Now we have supersonic missiles. Now we have certain missile defense systems that may give one of the sides the illusion of being able to launch first with impunity. So this is not the stability of the Cold War. This is extremely unstable situation. If nuclear weapons start spreading, do you people understand what you're doing? This is an international earthquake. This is an international earthquake. Oh, we didn't talk about a small little detail. Now we're doing away with the entire post-1945 international system, international institutions. We have the president of the U.S. bypassing the United Nations. I think over 30 organizations related to the UN. Now the U.S. is withdrawing from these organizations. So this is an earthquake. And everything we had and everything we knew about IR fell apart. And then to your other point, is this a world war? Well, let's think about this calmly, because everybody's saying world war, world war. What is a world war? It's a war where most or all great powers are involved, that takes place in more than one continent or more than one major region of the world. So really, if you look at what's happening now in Ukraine, this is World War I figures. This is such a tragedy. Over 1 million young Ukrainian and Russian and other nationalities, boys of other nationalities are now dead. It's a crime. It's a crime. It's a problem that could have been solved peacefully within the common security network in Europe, providing security guarantees to Ukraine, guaranteeing the territory of Ukraine, and reaching some understanding with Russia that would not threaten Russia's security. What is your job? You people go to college for what purpose? You call yourselves diplomats. This is your job, to negotiate these agreements before 1.5 million young people are killed. This is your job, and you failed at it. So there's a war in Ukraine. Now we have the Middle Eastern war. We have, certain sounds coming now from China with reference to Japan, with reference to Taiwan. All we need is for China to get involved. Once China gets involved, you have almost all great powers involved in a war that takes place in more than one region. The only thing that prevents an all-out war is nuclear deterrence, which is why we may have the proxy form of world war, meaning the war will take place at the periphery between great powers. Although one day they may try to do something that happened, I think, last year or a couple of years ago when the Ukrainian forces attacked one of the components of the nuclear triad, Russia's nuclear triad. And apparently that made Russians very, very angry because this is the kind of thing that can provoke a nuclear war. So we're walking at the edge of a precipice, Pascal. And it amazes me what kind of leaders we have. We talked about this during our first interview. The level of leadership in the world. It's just forget it. You can't compare these people to the people who led the world during the Cold War. I mean, I already mentioned some names. Maybe we should dig up Khrushchev and John Kennedy, and they can tell us the lessons of the Cuban Missile Crisis again, because apparently we forgot all about it.
It's such a bizarre moment. It's so also bizarre just to see that how if the United States goes haywire with Donald Trump, how the entirety of Europe follows it. It's like how, because I think one of the mistakes we make is to think under the framework of, the national good. We've still got too much of this idea of maybe also the realist paradigm that states do what's best, what's in their interest and so on. And, they weigh the options and then you have the balance or the hedge and blah, 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 all the lovely things we've developed in international relations in order to kind of make sense of a 19th century world, which is what most of these theorists used in order to make sense of it. Maybe they went also back a little bit to Rome whenever they ran out of cases in the 19th century. But the thing is, it doesn't operate like that. Like you cannot understand the actions of the United States if you don't look at the interests of Israel and the interconnection of these two systems. It is, it's not one country, two systems. It is two countries, one system, because they influence that they have on each other in the political process. John Mearsheimer told us, right, about the Israel lobby and so on. I mean, and it's not just that this lobby has influence, but it is the entire lobbying system, which then also gives the military-industrial complex, it's the healthcare complex, and so on. And that, together with a transatlantic elite, which is buddies and almost literally in bed with each other. If you look at what we learned in the Epstein files, right, how the highest echelons are all intermingled. And look at the files, look at the names. All of the Europeans are in there. There's hardly a Japanese name, hardly a Chinese name, hardly an African name from people inside like the actual African continent. This is a transatlantic kind of blob elite that works then together and moves the entire elitocracy in certain directions. So we are not operating under national frameworks. And this is just really hard to wrap our heads around, I believe.
No, it's very disappointing. Yes, democracy has been hijacked. America has been hijacked. I'm a U.S. citizen. I go back to the States. Like I told you, it's a shadow of what it used to be 20 years ago when I was young. The country has been hijacked by these global elites. And, I jokingly said that Vladimir Lenin came to me in my dreams and told me that, you remember what I taught you in school, is that the capitalist world, the financial and industrial elites are going to unite. And then you're going to have these transnational corporations that are going to put their governments in their pockets, and they're going to start fighting for the distribution of resources in colonies. Of course, this is not exactly what he said 120 years ago, but it's pretty close. Formation of these elites that have their own interests at heart, profits, controlling the entire world and controlling the government. This is what I mean by the end of democracy. It appears that the lobbying groups, the donors, the private interest groups, and I'm not just mean the Israeli lobby, there are many other lobbies, they have more power to sway the U.S. government than the U.S. electorate or those thousands of boys and girls, men and women who are supposed to die for these people. Yeah. And then time will pass, and then people like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are going to say the war in Iraq was a mistake. Well, bring back 5,000 people who died for it and hundreds of thousands of Iraqis.
Or Can you do prison? Go to prison. Just show that you actually take over some responsibility.
Yeah, you killed all these people. Take responsibility for your decisions, but they will not. They will say, I was given the wrong information. I was just watching a documentary about the Iraq War. It's pretty amazing how the decision makers pressured some people at the CIA to produce the evidence they needed, and how the U.S. Secretary of Defense said, I need references, I need proof. And instead of that, they told him, just take our word for it. And that's when they fabricated these pictures of secret labs and of planes spraying anthrax that wasn't even there. It was shot years ago. And this famous thing with, I don't know how to say this in English, the little thing.
The flask.
Yes, the flask with anthrax that he was shaking. It's pretty shameful. Well, the consequences are so enormous, and the people who make these decisions, I think it's okay for them to make mistakes like this. If I make a mistake and God forbid one of my students is hurt, I will be sued. It will be a very, very long lawsuit, and it will end very badly for me. But when you kill hundreds of thousands of people, you can just walk away. It's pretty sad.
I mean, this is the machinery of government, right? It's what allows you then to do all of this in the first place, because you will not have any of the negative consequences, which then just But that's the other thing. We were thinking in the national framework for too long, because we are now finding that there's all of these things that also, by the way, vindicates the constructivists who are saying, like, look, no, it's also the ideas that matter, right? It's really not just democracy. It's not just the brute power, but the fact that you have like Marxist, the capitalist ideology that asserts power, and the system that asserts power of it, and the other one, the evangelicals, the religious fanatics who actually want to bring about Armageddon, and that they have like a considerable sway, and that they actually guide also the foreign policy actions of the United States, and that then the structure that is created around this kind of model ideal of we the liberal West, that then drags everybody else with them, and the German chancellor sitting next to the U.S. president saying like, no, we are with you in a war of aggression, and the Brits go with it and the French go with it, and everybody now in our media, our mass media, that ugly beast, basically trying to whitewash this blatant war of aggression, right? I mean, there's nothing else. The Russian war against Ukraine pales in the shadow of what the Iran war now is. But they still managed to somehow put lipstick on this pig. It's quite fascinating, isn't it?
Well, yes. And the problem is that when you break the rules, you know that someone else is going to break the rules, which is what Bernie Sanders said when there was a discussion on Iraq 20-some years ago. He said, if we do this, then other countries are going to follow suit. When you bomb Yugoslavia and you bypass the United Nations, even though, yes, there were reasons to interfere, there was ethnic cleansing, there were barbaric killings, Srebrenica and Gorazde, it was horrible, and the international community had to get involved. But when you do it this way, by bypassing the UN, you set a precedent that the UN is no longer relevant, that you can use the force unilaterally. You can use force unilaterally. Then you do it in Libya. Then you do it in Iraq. Then you do it in Afghanistan. Then you start Arab Spring. Then other countries are going to say, oh, okay, well, we're going to do the same thing. Because, the road to World War I was paved, as you know, by, the Moroccan crisis, the intervention of Italy in Libya, by the Balkan Wars, because the world community kind of looked around and said, oh, it's okay to attack each other, apparently, because it's happening right now. So that paved the way to World War I. And despite the same token, the Japanese intervention in Manchuria, the Soviet-Finnish War, the Italian war of aggression against Abyssinia, Ethiopia, and the German seizure of Sudetenland, that paved the way to World War II. Because again, it showed that the League of Nations was irrelevant. There is no rule of law. But now I don't think you ever had a leader of a democratic nation openly say that there is no international law anymore. I don't think we ever had that. I'm trying to remember. Did we ever have a U.S. president or his entourage, people who openly said, who cares about the international law? It doesn't exist. It's the law of the jungle. It's the might makes right. In fact, this is precisely a quote from Prime Minister Baldwin, the British Prime Minister, when he in his speech, he said, we cannot agree to a world system where might makes right. And now you have the leader of the United States announcing this as a principle of his foreign policy. Very dangerous.
No, you're right. We never were in a moment when a US president or any kind of leader of a democratic country actually would put it into those words. They would do it, but they would always try to put the international law lipstick on the pig, right? Even in the Iraq war, like the whole reason why he put that flask there in the Security Council is because they were building the international law case for preemptive or preventive war. And, the entire 2003 saga actually kickstarted in our field a year-long discussion about just war theory, right? It was the revival of just war theory.
Yes.
I mean, none of that is happening right now because they're not trying to do that. They're arguing that it's not applicable, and even the Germans right now, if you watch German TV, it's horrible. The Armin Laschet, one of the main guys of the CDU, actually saying like, Iran cannot hide behind international law. They've been breaking international law all the time, so therefore now they cannot hide behind it. It doesn't apply to them because they've broken it before. It's like as if though. I mean, these people are it's quite amazing what they do, as if though the law didn't apply to a murderer or a thief just because they broke the law. That's
exactly the analogy I use.
It's not what's true. I'm not saying that's true what Iran did, but even if the allegation was true, the analogy would still not hold, because obviously either the law applies universally or it doesn't. And they're now making the case that it doesn't.
No, that's exactly the analogy I'm using, that you cannot say, I'm breaking the law because somebody else broke the law, because that leads to a major escalation and that leads to a world war. Then other countries are going to do the same thing. We're talking about the just war theory. It's, I love history. It's really amazing that this tradition, goes back to the Middle Ages. We had this tradition starting from the Middle Ages. The proportionality of the use of force, not killing non-combatants, having clear war objectives, exhausting all peaceful means before resorting to violence. And then another thing I looked up before talking to you today, this whole thing about the imminent threat. It is so not true. If you look at the international precedent that was used for this notion of imminent threat was the incident with Caroline, the Caroline precedent, when the Brits, I think, seized an American ship because they thought it was about to attack them, and the U.S. Secretary of State, Webster, he said, it needs to be, in order for it to be recognized as an imminent threat, you have to demonstrate that you had no time to consider any other option. The threat was really imminent, and you had no other ways of preventing this. I just looked up the exact quotation. It'll come to me. So basically, it has to be clear and present danger. It's going to happen right now, and you have no time to consider any options, and you have no other ways to address it. Well, the negotiations were going on. The negotiations were still going on. You can't say that. You can't make this argument. If you want to live in a world where there is no law, then just abolish the police in Japan or in Armenia and see how you're going to like it. What you're going to have to fend for yourself.
Absolutely. And, just for the IR or international law nerds among our listeners, there's in just war theory, there's this distinction between a preemptive war and a preventive war.
Yes.
And the only thing that's allowed is preemptive, because that means the other one is basically already aiming the weapons against you, just hasn't pulled the trigger yet. But the weapons are aimed and locked and loaded, as the US president would say, right? Only in those circumstances, it is preemptively you can use that as a way to build a case toward a preemptive strike, but everything else is considered preventive, and preventive strikes, even by just war theory standards of the Middle Ages, is not admissible.
I have the quote: necessity of self-defense, instant, overwhelming, leaving no choice of means and no moment of deliberation. That's the quote from 19th century precedent. And it's a little bit similar to like self-defense in many countries. I'm not a lawyer, but the principles are similar. When somebody enters your home, unless you live in Texas, you can't really shoot them. You have to show that you tried to remove yourself from the situation or resolve it by some other means. And then there was a clear and present danger to your life. And then maybe you can argue that was self-defense. So this is clearly a big stretch. The international institutions and principles are compromised. The whole institution of negotiations is compromised. How will Iran now negotiate, and what guarantee does Iran have that in 6 months there's going to be another attack? So this is the Gaza scenario or the Houthi scenario right now, because it ain't Yugoslavia and it's not going to be Syria or Libya. So it's going in that direction. So hopefully we will not see much more devastation and civilian and military personnel being killed. And hopefully in a few weeks, perhaps the countries can reach out to some intermediary. Maybe some mediator will step in and allow them to save face and exit this situation, whereby the U.S. will claim victory because it pummeled the Iranians, and the Iranians will claim that they won because they didn't give in. So maybe something like this can be negotiated. But it's a huge problem. And the root of this problem is in the mid-1990s, when the world leaders decided to abandon the idea of collective security, to abandon the wisdom of centuries of international thought. The only way to be secure is when you cooperate with everyone else and you consider everybody else's interests. This is the only way to do it, and the only successful example is the Concert of Europe that worked for 40 years precisely for that purpose. But in mid-1990s, a decision was made, screw the Russians, we're going to do what we want. And that's when because when you have action on one end, you have counteraction on the other. When you build alliances on this side, you will have counter alliances on that side. When you start intervening and changing governments in your region of the world, you're going to have other countries do the same. Intervene and change governments in the other side. It's the law of escalation. It's the law of action and reaction, the law of the security dilemma. We discussed all of it. So sometimes I feel like I should get a refund on my college tuition. And I don't even know why I'm teaching IR. You are an IR instructor, What's the point if the decision makers don't have the faintest idea of how international relations work and what the fundamental principles are? Maybe you and I should go design some app for people to look sexy on TikTok. We'll make more money.
No, the thing is, cancer kills patients whether or not the doctor understands it, right? I mean, getting frustrated at cancer winning is not a reason for us trying to stop understanding how it works. It's as sad as it is, but we are not at the end of times. I mean, we are just another iteration of people who for the last hundreds, if not thousands of years, try to understand why goddamn war keeps killing so many people, and we still within these thousands of years have managed to fix the system. And we are not at the end point. We're somewhere in the middle.
It's a great point. It doesn't
make it better. The thing is, and what I believe we've done as a species is we've been somehow successful at managing violence, even mass violence, on the nation state level. I mean, on the smaller unit level, right? And I said that in a different episode, but it takes quite something to come up with the idea of separation of power, right? Of checks and balances, of a system where central power is controlled even in a way that it then keeps a society stable. If you look at the description of like England 400 years ago, or Europe, or even other places, it was pretty brute and harsh and short, right? Life. Yes. But so we managed that, and we did that successfully, and we are more or less good at that level. But when it comes to the macro level, we're still within anarchy. We have no proper international system. I mean, the best idea in the last 100 years that we had, and we tried to implement it twice, is to create a global policeman.
Yes, but the global policeman doesn't work when great powers disagree.
Compare that to the idea of separation of powers and judiciary and whatnot and so on. I mean, an intricate system of population management, and then we just came up like let's make a club and then push it down. It's just not good enough yet.
You're raising some amazing points. With your permission, I'll just take a couple of minutes. First of all, the world policeman, it's a great idea, except it doesn't work when the great powers disagree, like the UN, or when they don't have the will to fight, like the League of Nations. You raised the idea of the internal domestic politics. If you look at England, the whole, I'm not an expert in English history, even though I love English history. I think it's an amazing country, and I love its culture and language and literature, etc. But what was the whole evolution of the British political system? No tyranny. There will be no tyranny. We're going to create a balance to the king's power, from Magna Carta to the provisions of Oxford to the Glorious Revolution, etc. The idea was Equilibrium. There has to be an equilibrium. No tyranny, no domination of one power. Equilibrium. But look at what's happening internationally. It's the tyranny of the hegemon on the international stage. So it's exactly the opposite of what's being done domestically. Now, regarding the world orders, we talked about it last time, 1648. What's the reason for the war? Intervention, religious wars. What do? We establish sovereign states, no intervention, in theory. Of course, it happens again. So we have sovereign states, territoriality, independence, autonomy, and that's going to, root out the wars. No, it happened again. Then we have the Treaty of Utrecht, equilibrium. What's important is to maintain the equilibrium of Europe, right? 1713. Ad conservandum in Europa equilibrium. We have to preserve the equilibrium in Europe. Doesn't work. We have Napoleonic Wars, 1815. What's the reason for wars? Revolution. What do? Holy Alliance. Suppress revolutions. Don't let revolutions spread. Austria walks into, Italy. Russia walks into Hungary. In Piedmont, in Naples, revolutions are suppressed. We have the Concert of Europe. The Concert of Europe. The idea that you can rationally manage the equilibrium of power. So no single country should become too powerful, because that is going to hurt the others. And in the end, it's going to hurt that country as well. So you have almost mathematical management of the balance of power in Europe for 40 years, until the Crimean War, until the German and Italian reunification. Then you have World War I, and then you have the recipe. What's the reason for World War I? Secret treaties, balance of power wars, entangling alliances. What do? We say no to balance of power wars. We're going to rely on the power of public opinion and what's moral and what's ethical. And then Edward Carr makes fun of it. Then the League of Nations falls apart. So every single time we try to build something, this is, it's so sad, because you mentioned this during our first interview, the Helsinki process. The Helsinki process, mid-70s, the Conference for Security and Cooperation in Europe. I feel like I lived my life backwards, like somebody pressed rewind on my remote control. My life is going backwards in mid-70s. Look at the society of the mid-70s, not early 80s, but mid-80s. Arms control, equilibrium, common European values, new thinking. This would be the case for constructivism, and look what happened. I'm glad you mentioned constructivism, by the way. I'll mention my book, etc. So in mid-70s, we knew this. We started the Helsinki process. We started talking about a common European security system. And then that too was abandoned again and again. You mentioned constructivism, right? What do constructivists say, for those who are interested? The way you see the world is going to change the world. If you think of anarchy not as something that leads to violence, but something that gives you an opportunity to cooperate, you can change the world by thinking of it differently. What we just saw right now shows exactly the opposite. When you have a certain power distribution, it's my theory, I have to still prove it. When you have a certain power distribution and one country becomes so powerful that it can do whatever it wants, certain type of people and certain views about the world begin to prevail. If we can do whatever we want, then I have a lot of ideas. We're going to change governments. We're going to interfere. We're going to intervene in these regions, in other regions. These kind of people, it creates an opportunity for them to come to power. We cited this before. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. The U.S. didn't behave this way during the Cold War. Well, in some regions it did, but not globally. The U.S. spoke, it condemned the Soviet aggression in Afghanistan. Remember, they even boycotted the Olympic Games in Moscow.
I would argue that there's still some liberal tint on your
yes, there is. Yes, there
because
is.
I had the discussion with David Gibbs, who says, like, look, the Americans made the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan all but impossible. This was very much part and parcel of how they goaded the Soviets into invading.
Well, yes, Brzezinski said that. He admitted that in his interview. They asked him, "What about tens of thousands of dead Afghanis?" And he said, "What are you talking about? We ended the Cold War. Wasn't it worth it?" He said that it was a trap that was set for the Soviet Union.
It was. So in a sense, the U.S. system never behaved differently, or at least after the Second World War, because before the Second World War, you had that thing where they said no involvement in Europe, right? Even the First World War, kind of they went, but then they went back again, right? But something changed dramatically in 45, but the system, especially the system that we've seen build up with all of these security agencies, what used to be the OSS and is now the CIA. So we haven't accounted for in our theories for the impact of like psychopathic individuals and how they can manage to infiltrate the system, and we haven't accounted really for the idea of a state within a state, the CIA and so on. Unaccountable and unauditable and black boxes that we don't know, but the only thing we can be sure is that they have very, very powerful control. And if some of the elites don't play along, then, well, you're a Martin Luther King or a Malcolm X or a John F. Kennedy or an RFK for that matter. And that's how the system then manages itself. And we don't have a proper way to account for that and the strategy to deal with this.
Yes, yeah, it's like Bolsheviks condemning imperialist wars all over the world, and then they initiate their own wars. Yeah. It's the human nature. It's the nature of human creatures and of our society. There is no ideal formula. And you're right, I still have a little bit of that liberal tint. I don't want to give up my faith in the liberal world, in the United States, in the West, but sadly, reality just punches me every day in my face, including me personally, because this terrible government we have in Armenia, with the support of the West, is now, basically sanctioning and oppressing and repressing everyone who tries to criticize it, and I'm one of them. So it's a joke. I became a victim of my own ideals. It's so funny.
Funny in a very unfunny way. It's in a very depressing way. But at the end of the day, we are all we victims of our own actions or of our own systems. I don't know how to put it. It's like, how many people share this frustration. We don't want this, and we live in the West or whatnot, right? A large part of my audience is in the United States. We all understand we don't want that it works like this, but it does. And it feels so horrible.
and that's what IR theory will tell you. It doesn't depend on what you want. Go, if you want, Pascal, sometimes to just get inspired, go watch some footage from the ceremony with Chancellor Kohl, the German reunification ceremony. The big prayer they had. Go watch the meetings between Gorbachev and Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. God forbid I said her name. Oh my God! Please don't kill me. So look. Oh my God! Your audience, you're a bunch of commies. Anyway, so go watch that footage. Watch that footage. You're like, oh my God! Like fraternity. Alle Menschen würden Brüder, right? This kind of ideas. We're going to be brothers. Look at this. Our leaders are talking to each other. They're bringing down the Berlin Wall. They're cutting up all these missiles, destroying chemical weapons, destroying nuclear weapons. They're talking about a common European house. What happened? This is the late 80s. Go look at that footage. I want to go back and live in the time of my youth because we were so much more rational. Our leaders were rational. Maybe we just lost the wisdom of World War II. Maybe the generation of World War II is gone and now we're back to this madness.
Or Arthur, or we were just young. We were just gullible. Because, if I remember correctly, Beethoven was a big fan of Napoleon because he thought he thought he would finally bring like the rationality to Europe and equality and fraternity and so on, and then he crowned himself emperor.
1804.
And Beethoven was destroyed, and he was like, how can he? It happens time and time again.
And you remember what he did.
And we won't be the last.
He renamed his symphony. His third symphony was supposed to be dedicated to Napoleon. When he heard in 1804 that he was going to crown himself, he crossed it out and said, no, it's just going to be a heroic symphony. Napoleon, the child of the French Revolution, liberté, fraternité, égalité. He turns into a new emperor, 6 million people. Europe is drowned in blood. Look at the human creatures. Look at our condition. Look at our society. We know nothing about the world. I begin to sound like Ricky Gervais. We know nothing about the world.
No, but that's the fix that we need to apply is the fix to this eternal kind of this turning around of everything, right? Going from destruction to build up, back to destruction, back to build up. We are kind of in a very horrible kind of Buddhist eternal circle of violence caught in that, and I don't know how to get out of it. Any Buddhists out there, if you have ideas, the Western ideas really fail. Christianity doesn't work in order to approach international violence.
No. And sadly, there will be no rebound after a nuclear war. We could learn, maybe World War II was our last big lesson, and we learned that lesson for a few decades, but now apparently we have to learn it again. Sadly, the nuclear war, if it happens, God forbid, is not going to give us second chances. We're not all going to move to Latin America and wear masks to defend ourselves against radioactive substances coming down from the atmosphere. It's not going to be fun. So yes, we seem to go through these cycles. Sadly, we lost the wisdom. We unlearned the lessons of World War II. Remember President Eisenhower, he was a war hero during World War II, and he was the one who was warning us about these private interest groups, about the military-industrial complex. He was right. And sadly, here we are. I just want to hope that this madness will end and these leaders will finally come to understand that there is no other way to assure your security other than having collective security, collective discussion.
It's not the leaders, it's the system. I'm still convinced it's a complexity problem. 8 billion people. We are species not good at managing 8 billion. We can't do it. And we end up killing our own. So we can't manage the complexity of 8 billions because in the end, Donald Trump he's the outcome. He's a symptom of something much, much deeper, right? This war is a symptom of something much, much deeper, and we haven't properly figured out how to do the management on that level of how many people we are currently.
Yeah, well, yes. It's a big crisis. It's a big crisis of governance. We have to research, why do people like this come to power? Why is it that the democratic institutions fail at constraining them? Because that's part of the democratic peace theory, is that democratic institutions are going to prevent a leader like this from declaring war. And instead, the Congress approved it. You saw it, right? There were a few days ago, there was a vote, and they approved the war. So one more strike against the democratic peace theory.
They didn't approve the war. They approved the right of Donald Trump to do that, which is in breach of Constitution. So it's like, you're dissolving the entire idea on the constraints internally, right? So
it's a big crisis. It's a big philosophical, conceptual crisis. What do we do with private interest groups? What do we do with lobbyists? What do we do with donors? Maybe there is a way to organize elections in such a way that you don't need a lot of money to run for office. I don't know how to do it. Then you will become less dependent on lobbyism. And lobbyism is a big problem. It's an evil that needs to be rooted out. The elected representatives should be accountable to their voters, not to private interests. It should be banned. There are over 1,500 lobbying firms in Washington. Over 1,500 lobbying firms. This is not a democracy. This is the rule of money. This is the rule of oligarchs.
Good, my friends. It's again another one of these depressing moments when we have to admit that we just don't know how to continue and how to go forward, and that all of us who go and study for many, many years, that we all still end up in the same boat, being baffled at the violence that our systems are still able to unleash on others. Arthur, people who would like to follow you and read more of your analysis and your thinking, where should they go?
If with your permission, I'll send you my Telegram channel. I told you I finished the first volume of my book. I'm now working on the second. I would be happy to share it with anybody who would like. It will be my gift. And I'm now sharing it with my students here in Armenia and in some other countries of the former Soviet Union. I find consolation in history. I love reading international history because when you see people struggling with the same problems, with the same madness for centuries, and you see them make the same mistakes, seeing the same results, it gives you some sense of detachment. I mean, as human species, we're only, as Homo sapiens was 300,000 years old, and the first, Lucy and Ororine tugenensis, 6 million years? So it's relatively recent. What do you want? We need to evolve. Our society needs to evolve. History helps me approach this, in a calmer manner. And I really hope that this crisis will get resolved. I will send you the coordinates of my Telegram channel, and then your readers, I would be happy to answer.